At my brother's wedding rehearsal dinner, they handed me a mic, so I told everyone what he did to my ex. There's a strange silence that falls over a family right before it breaks apart. It's not the loud kind, the screaming, the slammed doors, the big dramatics. No, it's more like the hush that comes before a storm. That sense that everyone is smiling a bit too tightly, speaking a bit too sweetly, as if holding their breath, trying to keep the cracks from showing. That was the mood leading up to my brother's wedding. David, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I suppose every family has one. The kid who walks into the room and commands attention, who racks up awards, praise, and praise for those awards, who glows so brightly that everyone else in the house ends up squinting just to survive it. That was David. And growing up in his shadow taught me a lot about invisibility. I'm not writing this to expose him exactly, or to be petty. If anything, I'm writing it because after everything that happened, I need to put it somewhere. Because when the truth finally came out, when the tightly packed lies and secrets finally unraveled at that perfect, picturesque wedding, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the day my mother called, voice bright with glee, and said the words I'd been expecting to hear for years but still wasn't quite prepared for. Your brother's getting married. And just like that, the machinery kicked in. The family machine. The one I'd been a reluctant cog in for decades, grinding away under the weight of unspoken expectations and meticulously buried truths. From that phone call on, it wasn't about love or celebration or even the marriage itself. It was about image, status, projection, and somewhere deep in the middle of it all was the secret. A secret I'd carried for years. One I never asked to hold. One that didn't belong to me, but had defined so much of my life. I didn't go to that wedding expecting to say anything. Honestly, I didn't even want to attend. But when you're the other sibling, your absence says more than your presence ever could. So I packed a bag, put on a smile, and flew into the heart of the storm. What happened next, I still replay it in my mind. Not because I regret it, but because I finally said the thing none of us were ever supposed to say out loud. Growing up, it wasn't immediately obvious that David was the golden one. Kids don't usually notice that kind of thing right away. At first, he was just my older brother. We shared a room for a while. He taught me how to sneak Oreos from the kitchen without getting caught. We used to race our bikes down the hill by the old elementary school and dare each other to jump the curb. But little by little, things changed. It wasn't just that David was good at things, he was the best at them. Soccer, science fairs, piano recitals. Whatever he touched turned into a blue ribbon or a scholarship or a feature in the local paper. And my parents, especially my mother, treated each success like a personal victory, like it proved something about her. Me? I was the quieter one. I liked books. I liked drawing. I liked sitting in the backyard just listening to the world. But those things didn't win trophies. They didn't look good in Christmas letters. They didn't make for proud smiles at parent-teacher night. By the time I was 10, I understood the unspoken rules. If David won something, it was family dinner and cake and applause. If I brought something home, a drawing, a short story, a science quiz with a big red A+, my mother would glance at it and say, "That's nice, honey," before going back to whatever she was doing. It wasn't that she was cruel, just disinterested, distracted, focused entirely on the bright, shining star orbiting her. My father wasn't much better. He was a man of few words and fewer emotions. He mostly kept to himself, watching the world through the lens of sports and news. If you needed something fixed, bike tire, broken lamp, leaky faucet, he was there. But emotionally, forget it. His love was implied, never spoken. And he, too, lit up more for David's victories than mine. A head nod, maybe. "Hey, that's my boy." I started shrinking myself to fit the spaces left behind. I stopped showing them my work. I stopped trying to win their attention. I learned to find validation elsewhere. From teachers, friends, mentors. I grew self-sufficient out of necessity, not pride. And then came high school, the years when things really started to separate. David had already graduated by then, valedictorian, scholarship to a top-tier university, captain of the soccer team. My parents still talked about his graduation dinner like it was the Met Gala. When my turn came, it was quieter, smaller, more obligatory. I remember one night during my junior year, I had a panic attack in the middle of the night. Full chest pressure, can't breathe kind of fear. I didn't know what was happening. I went to my mother's room, scared, shaking. She opened one eye and said, "It's probably just stress, sweetheart. Try to sleep it off." David had called her that same night to ask for help with a grad school recommendation. She got up, turned on her laptop, and spent an hour writing it out for him. That's when I really understood. My value was conditional. My needs were inconvenient. I started putting up walls. Emotionally, at least, I played the role of the quiet sibling. The one who didn't need much. The one who'd help clean up after dinner, volunteer to run errands, never cause a scene. But inside, a quiet storm was building. Not anger exactly. Something more corrosive. A kind of sorrow that sits in your bones. The kind that only grows stronger when the people who are supposed to love you don't really see you. And all the while, David's life kept climbing. Prestigious job. Big city apartment. Picture-perfect girlfriend. My mother practically beamed every time she said his name. Your brother just got promoted. Your brother bought a condo. Your brother's flying home next week. Make sure you're here. Then, at some point, came the secret. It was buried deep, tied to something that happened during one of his visits home. Something I saw. Something he swore me to silence about. I'll get to that. But the thing about secrets in a family like mine is they don't disappear. They sit there dormant like landmines, until someone steps on them, until the perfect wedding comes along, until everyone is dressed up and smiling and pretending, and the pressure to be flawless finally gives way. But I'm skipping ahead again. Back then, I just kept playing my role. The quiet sibling, the reliable one, the observer. And the more I watched, the more I started to understand something. In a house built on image, the truth is the most dangerous thing of all. I got the call on a Tuesday, early afternoon. I remember because I had just gotten back from work and was halfway through microwaving some leftover curry when the phone rang. My mother's name lit up the screen, and for a split second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But some part of me, maybe habit, maybe duty, answered, "Sweetheart," she said, breathless and buzzing, like she'd just won the lottery. "David's getting married." I blinked, leaned against the kitchen counter, and tried to make my voice sound appropriately thrilled. "Wow, that's big news." "I know, right?" she gushed. "She's beautiful, smart, and her family lovely people. Old money, very classy." There it was. Not just about David finding someone. It was about status. Always about status. They're having a big wedding. Elegant, formal, by the lake. Oh, and you'll be in the family photos, of course. Try to wear something slimming. Okay? I smiled to myself. There it was again. That familiar sting in her voice. Hidden in sweetness but sharp all the same. She didn't mean to hurt. That was the trickiest part. When someone wounds you without ever raising their voice, it's harder to explain why it hurts. "Great," I said, letting my voice drift toward neutral. "When's the big day?" "June. We're flying everyone out for the weekend. We're booking a villa. It'll be spectacular." I could practically hear her already planning the Instagram captions in her head. When I hung up, I just stood there, staring at the blank wall in my kitchen while my food continued to rotate behind the microwave glass. I felt it again, that quiet sense of being an extra in a movie about someone else's life. The weeks that followed were a blur of email threads and group chats that I was technically included in, but not really involved with. My mother took control like a general preparing for battle. The dress code, the color scheme, the signature cocktails, every detail was curated. My father mostly nodded and pulled out his wallet whenever needed. "David?" he called once, briefly. Said, "Glad you'll be there." In the same tone someone might say, "Thanks for feeding the cat." Then there was her, Lena. She reached out to me a few times before the wedding. Just casual texts. A photo of a puppy she saw in the park. A meme about being the future sister-in-law. She was warm, funny, kind. And somehow that made it worse. Because she had no idea. No idea who David really was. Not the version she saw on date nights and holiday getaways, but the version I had witnessed when no one was looking. The version capable of things that would make her stomach twist. One night, a week before the wedding, she called. Said she wanted to get to know the less talked about sibling. I laughed. That's a generous way of putting it. We talked for over an hour. I liked her more than I wanted to. I wanted to find something off. Something I could use to justify what I was feeling. But no. She was real. Genuine. I get the sense, she said gently, that your family's a bit complicated. I paused. Complicated is one word for it. There was silence on the line. Not awkward, just heavy. Like she was waiting to see if I'd say more. I didn't. Not yet. Because what do you do with a secret that doesn't belong to you? One that could shatter everything but also maybe set people free? I told myself it's not your business. Just go, be polite, get through it. But deep down I think I knew. Somewhere in the middle of those invitations and fittings and perfectly arranged floral centerpieces, something had shifted in me. The silence I'd carried for years was growing heavier. The lies more unbearable. And the stage was nearly set. Every family has a closet. Ours didn't just have skeletons, it had a whole graveyard. I don't even remember the exact moment when I first realized something was off with David. That's the thing about people like him. They're good at being what everyone wants to see. He wore charisma like a tailored suit. In public, he was flawless, charming, attentive, the kind of guy who helped old ladies cross the street and remembered your favorite coffee order. But behind closed doors, there were fractures. Little glimpses of something colder. A quick flash of irritation if someone contradicted him. A condescending tone when he thought no one was listening. A tendency to twist stories in his favor, to always come out looking just a little shinier. Still, I probably wouldn't have said he was bad. Not then. Not until the night that changed everything. It was about 4 years ago. David was home for the holidays. I had just gotten out of a messy breakup. Still bruised from it, honestly. My ex, Morgan, and I had been together for 2 years. It ended suddenly, messily. No closure. Just a text saying she needed space, followed by silence. I didn't talk much about it with my family. I knew they didn't care for Morgan. They thought she was too serious and not right for you. Which was code for, she didn't kiss our asses. But the pain was real. I was grieving, and no one seemed to notice. Then, one night, I got up to get water. It was late. Everyone else was asleep. Or so I thought. I heard voices, muffled, low. I followed them to the living room, half expecting to find my dad falling asleep to some rerun. But it wasn't him. It was David. With Morgan. They were sitting on the couch, too close. Her hand was on his arm. His voice was soft, flirtatious. And then, clear as day, I watched him lean in and kiss her. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. It lasted all of 2 seconds before she pulled back, eyes wide, face flushed. She looked around like she'd just realized where she was. He laughed, brushed it off, said something I couldn't hear. I backed away, heart pounding, and didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she was gone. Said she had to get back to the city early. He barely mentioned her. Just shrugged and went back to being the perfect son. I confronted him the day before he left. I saw you, I said. He didn't even blink. Saw what? You kissed her. You knew we'd just broken up. He sighed, like I was being dramatic. She kissed me, actually, and nothing happened. Let it go. I stared at him, trying to piece together how someone could be so casual about detonating another person's world. I trusted you. Don't be so sensitive, he snapped. Jesus, do you want me to apologize? Fine. I'm sorry. There. Happy. And then, this part one remember exactly, he leaned in and said, if you ever bring this up to anyone, just remember who people are going to believe. That was the moment everything changed. Not because he'd kissed someone he shouldn't have, but because he knew he could get away with it. That my word meant nothing compared to his image. And he was right. I didn't say a word. Not to Morgan. Not to my parents. Not to anyone. What was the point? I started pulling away after that. stopped going home for holidays, declined invitations. I told myself it was just distance, but really it was survival. You can only swallow so much before it starts to choke you. And now he was getting married. To someone who trusted him. Someone kind and bright and good. Someone who didn't see the cracks yet. I kept replaying that moment in my mind. Him and Morgan on the couch, the way he looked afterward, unbothered. What if he hadn't stopped? What if I hadn't been there? What if Lena was next? Part of me wanted to tell her. Desperately. I even wrote it out once, in an email I never sent. But then I thought about the backlash. About my mother's voice, shrill and betrayed. Why would you ruin this for him? About my father's silence. About David's smile twisting into a threat. And so I kept it to myself. Again. But there's only so long you can carry a secret like that without it turning into rot. And weddings, especially ones designed to be perfect, have a way of bringing buried things to the surface. The question wasn't if the truth would come out. It was when. And who would be left standing when it did. The villa was straight out of a lifestyle magazine. White stone, creeping vines, glassy lake on one side and manicured gardens on the other. Guests were ferried in from the airport in sleek black SUVs. The air smelled like lavender and expensive decisions. And everywhere I turned, people were smiling, laughing, posing. It was like watching a movie set. Everyone playing their role to perfection. Bridesmaids in pastel gowns floating across the lawn like synchronized swans. Groomsmen cracking jokes, cufflinks flashing in the sun. Waiters in white gloves passing trays of champagne and tiny edible flowers. I arrived Friday afternoon and immediately felt overdressed and underprepared. My suit fit fine, but I carried the quiet weight of someone who doesn't quite belong. Like I was a background extra in a scene about my brother's ideal life. David greeted me with that signature grin, arms wide like we were best friends reunited. There he is, my favorite sibling. He hugged me, slapped my back too hard, and whispered, "Glad you made it." And for a brief moment I wondered if he knew, if he could feel it, the thing simmering just beneath my skin. The thing I'd never said, not out loud, but was dragging behind me like a shadow. I smiled back. Wouldn't miss it. Our mother was already in full regalia. Perfectly coiffed hair, tasteful jewelry, and that brittle kind of cheerfulness she wore like armor. She hugged me perfunctorily, then launched into a list of weekend events. Rehearsal dinner, lakeside brunch, welcome cocktails, the ceremony, the after-party. And don't forget the group photos. You're standing next to David. Try not to squint. Not a "how are you?" Not a "glad you're here." Just logistics. Optics. Her only real love language. The rehearsal dinner was held in a glass pavilion lit by strings of white bulbs and tea lights floating in bowls. Everyone stood and toasted David and Lena. Stories, laughter, the clinking of glasses. I watched Lena from across the room, poised and glowing, utterly unaware of the fault line running beneath her feet. At one point, she sat beside me. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "I know it probably feels like you're being dragged through the David show." I raised an eyebrow. "You noticed that, huh?" She laughed. It's hard to miss. There was something in her voice, a soft edge, like she knew there was more to the story than what she'd been told. She sipped her wine and added, almost too casually, "You ever feel like he keeps part of himself hidden?" I looked at her then, really looked, and for a split second, I nearly told her. The words hovered at the edge of my mouth like birds about to take flight. But I swallowed them. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I felt that." She nodded but didn't push. She just sat there, staring into her glass like it might reveal something she didn't want to know. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Morgan, about the way David had dismissed it all, how easily he'd manipulated the narrative. I remembered the shame, the self-doubt, the exhaustion of being gaslit not just by him, but by an entire family complicit in his version of events. And now Lena, smart, kind Lena, was about to step into the same trap. Saturday morning came with golden light and buzzing nerves. The ceremony was at sunset, and the whole day was a slow, deliberate build-up to that moment. Hair, makeup, fittings, final touches. Everyone was fluttering around like birds in a glass cage. I stayed out of the way, took a long walk by the lake, watched ducks glide across the surface like they didn't have a care in the world. But the pressure was rising. You could feel it in the air, the way people were smiling too tightly, how David barked at a groomsman for misplacing his tie clip, how my mother snapped at a server for folding napkins the wrong way. The wedding planner looked like she was on the verge of a breakdown. And me? I felt strangely calm, like I was sitting at the center of a storm I'd seen coming for years. The truth was no longer just a memory. It had become a weight. And the closer we got to the vows, the heavier it became. There's something surreal about watching your entire family pretend everything is fine when you know it's not. It's like watching people decorate a house that's already on fire. But still, no one said a word. Not yet. And so we smiled. We posed. We clinked glasses. We waited. It happened during the rehearsal dinner toast. Not the ceremony. Not the after-party. Not in some movie scene dramatic interruption. No, it happened in a quiet, unsuspecting moment when everything was going exactly according to plan. The speeches had started. The wine was flowing. Everyone had the warm, fuzzy look of people who'd eaten too much and were feeling sentimental. The maid of honor gave a sweet, slightly tipsy speech about Lena's childhood. A groomsman told a few safe, polished stories about David's college days. And then, someone suggested I say something. I wasn't supposed to speak. There was no slot for the quiet sibling who keeps to themselves. I was there for symmetry in the photos and to say, wow, so happy for you guys, like a good supporting character. But people turned to me. David gave me a nod. Lena smiled. And something in me gave way. I stood. I didn't raise my glass. I didn't clear my throat. I just looked at the room, at the glimmering lights and the polished cutlery and the parents beaming at their golden son, and I spoke. I've spent a lot of my life watching my brother shine, I began. And I don't say that with resentment. Not anymore. Just observation. Some people chuckled politely. They thought I was starting with a joke. David grinned like this was all part of the show. But there's something about light, I continued. Something people forget. The brighter it is, the harder it is to see the shadows it casts. That's when the room went still. I didn't rush. I didn't accuse. I just laid it out, plain, measured, true. I watched him break someone once, someone I loved, and then pretend it never happened. I watched him use charm to erase consequences. I carried that truth for years while everyone else applauded. Lena had stopped smiling. David's jaw tensed. My mother's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. I'm not saying this to be cruel, I said, looking directly at Lena. I'm saying it because you deserve to know what you're marrying into, because love without truth is just performance. There was silence. Heavy, brittle, alive. David stood slowly. His voice was tight. What the hell are you doing? I turned to him. I'm doing what no one else ever did with you, I said. I'm telling the truth. And then I sat back down. The room didn't erupt. No yelling. No chaos. Just this deep, stunned hush. As if the whole event had been a balloon, and I'd finally let the air out. David stared at me like I was a stranger. My mother's face had gone pale with fury. My father just looked down at his plate. But Lena? She got up. Quietly. Calmly. She slipped her napkin onto her chair and walked out of the pavilion without a word. David followed, calling her name. And that's when people finally started moving. Whispering. Shifting in their seats. A few guests looked at me like I'd slapped the bride. Others looked relieved. Like something they'd suspected but never voiced had just been confirmed. The dinner ended early. I went back to my room, heart pounding but steady. No one came to yell. No one knocked. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how some truths don't explode. They just land and change everything. The morning after the toast was unnervingly quiet. No screaming, no door slamming, just a kind of vacuum, like the entire villa had exhaled too hard and didn't know how to breathe back in. I got up early and walked the grounds. The lake was still. The sky was a soft, indecisive gray, like it hadn't yet committed to being a beautiful day or a terrible one. I passed a few vendors quietly packing away decorations. A bridesmaid hurried by me without saying hello. And my mother? She stood at the far end of the garden, talking to the wedding planner in hushed, clipped tones, face set like stone. David found me around 10. He didn't storm in. He didn't raise his voice. That wasn't his style. He came to my door wearing a stiff white shirt, jaw tight, hands in his pockets. "You humiliated me," he said, "in front of our entire family." I looked at him, really looked. For the first time, he didn't look untouchable. He looked like a man watching his castle crack down the middle. "I told the truth," I replied. "Something you've been allergic to since we were kids." He stared at me like he didn't recognize who I was anymore. "It was years ago. You're still holding on to that." "I'm holding on to the fact that you hurt someone I loved, and then convinced everyone, including me, that it didn't matter." "It didn't mean anything," he said sharply. "It was one mistake." "It wasn't the kiss," I said. "It was how you covered it. How you made me feel crazy for being hurt. How you've done that over and over to anyone who doesn't fall in line." He didn't reply. He just stood there, mouth a tight line. Then, "Lena's not answering my calls." I shrugged, though the pang in his voice landed harder than I expected. "Maybe she's just thinking. Maybe she deserves to." He opened his mouth like he was about to argue, then stopped. "You know Mom's furious," he said finally. "She says you ruined the best day of our lives." I almost laughed. It was never our day. It was yours. And hers. I was just the prop you stand next to in the photos. For the first time, he flinched. And in that silence, something shifted. He turned to go but paused at the door. "You were never just a prop," he said, quieter now. "You just made it hard to include you." I tilted my head. Maybe because I didn't want to be part of the illusion. He didn't respond. He just left. Later that afternoon, my mother came to see me. No hug. No greeting. Just a practiced smile stretched too tight. "I hope you're satisfied," she said. "You got your moment." I looked her in the eye, calm as ever. It wasn't about me. It was about finally saying what no one else would. "You always had a flair for melodrama," she said. "You could have talked to us. Privately. Would you have listened?" I asked. She didn't answer. And that was answer enough. "I don't think I'll be coming home for a while," I said. She blinked, caught off guard. "Don't be ridiculous. Families fight. We move on." "Families also lie," I replied. "And I'm done pretending." She shook her head, turned, and walked away. That evening, as guests left early and the cleanup crew dismantled the dream, I got a message from Lena. It was simple. "Thank you. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I'm grateful. For the truth. You deserved better from all of them." I didn't respond right away. Just sat with it. Let it sink in. Someone had heard me. Someone believed me. And not because I begged or bent or broke myself to be palatable, but because I finally stood in the light. And for the first time in my life, that light wasn't David's. It was mine. It's been 6 months since the wedding that wasn't. They didn't go through with it. There was no grand statement, no official announcement. Just silence. A few polite phrases exchanged through the grapevine. Postponed indefinitely. Taking time to reevaluate. The kind of language people use when they're trying to avoid the wreckage. Lena and I exchanged a few more messages. Nothing too heavy. Just check-ins, light conversation. I never pushed her for details. I figured she had enough voices in her head already. David never apologized. But then, I never really expected him to. People like him don't apologize in the way you want them to. Not because they don't feel guilt, but because they've never had to live inside the consequences of it. We haven't spoken since that morning. My parents still send the occasional holiday text. My mother tried to act like nothing ever happened, her coping mechanism of choice. My father remains quiet. As always, a man built more for maintenance than emotional repair. And me? I moved cities. Got a new job. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy. Just something mine. I go for long walks again. I see a therapist who doesn't try to fix me, just listens and reflects. Some nights, I lie awake thinking about how long I let silence shape my life, how often I let other people's comfort come before my truth. But most nights I sleep better than I ever did. For a long time I thought healing would look like reconciliation, like someone finally seeing me, acknowledging the hurt, making it right. But now I know it isn't about them. It never was. Healing came the moment I stopped waiting for someone to hand me permission. The moment I stood up, said the thing I wasn't supposed to say, and let the pieces fall where they may. Truth doesn't always look like justice. Sometimes it just looks like a quiet room, a steady breath, and the ability to live without flinching. People still talk about David like he's the golden child. Maybe he always will be, but I've stopped measuring my worth by his shadow. I've stopped trying to squeeze myself into a family portrait where I was always meant to be background noise. There's a photo I keep now, one from the rehearsal dinner, just before the toast. I'm off to the side, not posing, not smiling, just watching. I look at that version of myself and I feel something close to pride, because they all thought the story was about David. But it was never his story at all. It was mine.